Back from that short commercial break, we are into the second and final hour of the Hotline Show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. I'm still with Honorable Joseph Ochieno, the President of the Uganda People's Congress. I also have retired Major Ambassador Pollar Awich from the National Resistance Movement. He's the Director, External Affairs there. And I have Charles Kazoba, the Executive Director for the Center for African Affairs and Diplomatic Studies. Now let's go straight to politics. The Kawempe North elections were marred with fast violence, but also we had one of the political parties saying that they were rigged of their victory. That was the National Resistance Movement. In that particular campaign as well, journalists were beaten, tremendously, and many of them are still nursing wounds up to today. This election comes at a time when Uganda is entering what you call an election cycle, as we are going to the polls next year in January. So that means this year will be characterized by first a lot of campaigning activities, a lot of mobilization. In fact, some political parties have actually started these particular processes. What kind of election are we gearing up to, especially when a snippet of Kawempe North has shown what may happen or what could actually happen? Are we just fearing, or there's actually a cause to worry? I'll start, I think, with you, Honorable Joseph Ochieno. You were here as the elections were going on in Kawempe. What's your comment over all those issues that I've highlighted? What do you speak about the experience of Kawempe North?
I must say that it's sort of really the second election as a by-election that genuinely surprised me more, followed by the national general elections of 2021. The violence, the conduct of the governing authorities, the ineptitude of the Electoral Commission, including at the time of nomination of presidential candidates, almost the apparent bias by the related authorities of 2021 genuinely surprised me, and I've said on programs, including I think Comrade Rich and I have got the privilege of comradeship, but also of being in more than one show every now and again, sometimes together, which is fantastic. I may have said in one other show where Comrade Rich is that for the first time actually, while in Uganda in the course of elections, I felt nearly scared. Yes. I was genuinely worried, and I got scared. And I got scared because in the many apparent violence as it was going on. But one particular case was when I was to be hosted within an hour or so by an international news media, and it's a news media I've been involved with for a long time. And I couldn't, partly because of interferences, and partly because of state security, and partly because this global media houses are always very much, they take serious note and concern about their journalists, and normally their guests and their sources. And an interview had to be terminated within sort of minutes leading to it because of the state in which things were happening. Then fast forward really after those elections, I said that it was my hope that the burden of responsibility would lie with Mr. Museveni and his political organization to redirect the tone of polity in the country. And that ideally needed to have also addressed the discomfort, particularly from one sub-region, meaning particularly Buganda, that felt, and it was open knowledge, that Buganda predominantly felt that we're sort of much more targeted, without prejudice, in part because many people presented NUP as a Buganda political organization, which is a debatable conversation, but particularly because the leader is from Buganda and was predominant, and indeed predominantly enjoys the support from Buganda. That feeling was there. And of course, in politics, public opinion matters. And so it didn't happen. Instead, I think after the swearing in, we went on to almost like chest thump. Fast forward to more recent by-elections. When the Bukedea by-election took place, that very violent thing, where the targets were predominantly NRM, and predominantly NRM versus and against NRM members and candidates. I was there. I came out, used some of the spaces to raise concern amongst many others, colleagues in the spaces. Mr. Museveni came out and said he was, one, surprised, and two, as I say, to his credit, he said that he was very concerned, reprimanded people, and I think again, Comrade and I in other spaces simply said that, look, we were waiting to see more heads rolling as a result of whatever happened in Bukedea. The next by-election was Oyam. In relative terms, it was less violent than Bukedea. And many people argued that in part it was because of the restraint as a result of Mr. Museveni's response, public response, and rebuke to the people who committed those atrocious offenses, actions in Bukedea. Then we had local by-elections, regardless of the results, again relatively safe and peaceful. Of course, recently we had Kisoro by-elections. Fast forward, then we come to Kawempe. Comrade Awich, you're a member of the NRA and indeed NRA top echelon, the central executive. If there is any strategic thinking, and as someone from the party who should be able to advise, it was very clear that Buganda at the moment, is a home for NUP. And it's very clear that NRM was really unlikely to win. And if NRM was to win back Buganda, the starting point was not going to be Kawempe. It was not going to be Kawempe because the by-election was a result of a death of a member of parliament, Segrinya, substantially popular, very eccentric in many ways, but at the same time, a guy who died as died as a result, many people would argue, of being brutalized by the security services, this regime. And so, if I was advising NRM, I at least expected them to show bad face there. In any case, they needed to present themselves as very good guys. As if I was advising, say, look, do everything within reason and allow NUP come and reclaim their seat. In any way, it would actually be a healing process, And if they had done that, NRM would be in a much better position going forward over the next few months to campaign around Buganda and reclaim a new space. But shockingly, these guys fired on goal. I think their former communications chief, my good friend Ofono Pondo, writes in one of in his opinion piece column. Basically, it's almost like a recruitment thing for NUP and NRA actually wanting to decampaign itself by the nature and brutality that happened. Now,
but do you think that can happen?
The brutality, what is that?
No, decampaigning themselves.
They did.
They did, but do you think that was the heart behind that?
No, we don't know. I don't even think Comrade Rich may possibly tell us the motivations. Okay. Of course, some of the things that we know and that we hear, including from some of our NRM colleagues, are not necessarily things that we have here on air. But we all know that people in NRA were not really happy about what happened. And in many cases, we also know that it almost nearly ended up being a battle between Muhoozi and Kyagulanyi, almost like a personal thing if you want to go down there. But below that, this is the point.
Yes, sir.
It's completely unacceptable that not only journalists be brutalized, but for the record, Charles, that there is evidence, including on videos doing the round, that journalists were deliberately targeted. Individual media houses, certain media houses were deliberately targeted. Certain individual journalists in their individual capacities seemingly deliberately targeted. And then to the deployment of security services. Why deploy the army? Why deploy JAT? Why deploy hooded masked people in a by-election, merely a by-election at Kampala. A by-election that, if you're doing the good work that Comrade Rich is doing for themselves, you should know that you wouldn't win. You know, our former High Commissioner, UPC, former Ugandan High Commissioner to London, Shafiq Arain in the 80s, is arrested, fantastic Ugandan Asian man born in Tororo, told me that in 1980, leading to the general election, they did the scheme in 1979 leading to elections. And he told me that they knew roughly that they're going to win, UPC was going to win 72 plus or minus 2 parliamentary seats. And that in Buganda, they will do exceedingly well if they got 2 seats. They knew they would win 1 seat. And indeed, they won 1 seat, only 1 seat from Mubende. Point is, as a political organization, you should be able to know this and conduct some of your own.
This is my stronghold, this is
precisely. And these guys are what state intelligence, beyond their own political party intelligence. They did not need to do what they did. And so what they did has not only given the NUP much more lead in Buganda, and then maybe even more votes and sympathy across the country. But actually, NRA has substantially discredited itself. And I can tell you, as somebody who's actually quite reasonably connected across the country, and I get feedbacks. So, no, I think NRA did terrible in campaign.
Let me bring in Awich.
I know that whatever the case, NRA was doing these things. If they're doing this thing as a precursor to 2021 elections, 2026 elections, which is coming, I think it was a precursor which is badly designed. And for that, obviously, to worry people, because people are fearing to participate in the forthcoming elections. We don't know how
we're going to come there.
Yeah, sure.
Honorable Awich, judging by our past and the present, why do elections have to be in that modus operandi, in that manner? Why do they have to be characterized by violence, arrests, death even sometimes? What is in that electoral cycle that brings about that, sir?
The why it should be like that, first of all, there should be no reason whatsoever to justify it being in violence. There should be no reason. No amount of reason should make it violent. But even then, if you set me in an examination room and I had to answer why, which I have to give reason, I think the reason is that maybe it could be answered by especially the state actors who are privileged to intelligence information. So I don't know if the intelligence they got warranted this kind of deployment, because this deployment is the one which entered into the mix to cause the violence. So I'm not privy to whatever intelligence they have, so they are better placed to answer that.
Okay.
Now,
what do you think?
So, my friend, the Congress, I don't know whether he hear badly. He seems to have refused to call us NRM. He calls us NRM.
Yeah, yes, you are.
NRM is no more. The 1995 Constitution dealt away with NRM by introducing or converting the then army from National Resistance Army to Uganda People's Defense Forces. But of course, it should seem better.
No, but even your leader, your president, in certain times will always bring out the statement and says, the original. You have said it in advance.
Let the congressman say the original NRA, which I'm privy to. I'm part of it because I have had RA number before UPDF came, and then I also had RO. So RA means it is the one I got before I was commissioned, and RA resistance officer is when I was commissioned. I'm truly NRA.
When you were a child.
Yes. Now, now that you put that question, I like to answer also to her this way. The background to this election was, of course, as my colleague says, the perceived understanding was that it is a noob area. But for us as a party, we thought that every election has its dynamics.
Well, fair enough.
And we also thought that over time, since this election happened, the 2021, government has made lots of intervention, PDM and all this and all that. So we thought that this could have had impact. So we had gone in as a party with our flag bearer to do what we can. Remember, in the part of the background is that at the current standing in parliament, even if NRM loses 50 seats, we still have a commanding majority.
Yeah.
So a particular constituency should not be a do or die.
No.
It shouldn't be a do or die, because we have absolute majority that even losing 20 seats or 50 seats now will still give us majority.
Yeah.
We would still be able to pass the laws, pass the policies, or any resolution in parliament. So a particular constituency like this one shouldn't have been a do or die. But we thought that every election has its dynamics. Besides, we thought that 2021, 2022, 23, 24, government has made interventions, which is part of what we had in, not part, all of what we had in our manifesto, government was implementing. So we were here to see whether the people have changed their attitudes. But ideally, losing in this constituency wouldn't have been a do or die. But unfortunately, you see what happened. Violence came.
These activities, Major, look bad on you. I don't know if as the NRM, you sit back and reflect and say, this is negative PR for us. And I think, it's, in fact, the leader of the election commission of NRM, Tango Doi, came out to say, you have even made us lose an election before even the votes were cast.
Maybe I'm slow in my packaging, making you answer a question that I was coming to
Please
answer.
come, sir.
Maybe I was slow in my, but I was coming there. The conduct here was not called for, because it was before the camera, and this displeased also our chairman, and our chairman went ahead to say, yes, there was this violence, but we should also, to address it holistically, ask why these people came in. And that is what had alluded to the intelligence. But whatever it is, the violence wasn't called for. The conduct worked in to our disadvantage, and we could still get the feelings now. Because whatever you do, there's a correlation between the army and the party. In that, we won the elections and we formed government. The army, as part of government, is under our control. And that is why I was even saying in one election, in the election that you cited, one of the agenda was, one of the issues in the manifesto was professionalizing. So there is no agency in the country that does not belong to the government that we formed. So we are vicariously liable for actions of any state. And by the way, Karanga, the general logic is that when a government ministry succeeds, say Minister of Agriculture, they say government has succeeded. But should Minister of Agriculture fail, said NRM has failed. So it looks like we are there to take the failure and the success belongs to government. Yes. But government is under the ruling party. They are implementing our manifesto. So we can't run away from the violence done by the military. Even if you try to say, no, it is the military, it is the UPDF, people will say, okay, fine, it is UPDF, but have you really convinced them? No. Therefore, the conduct was, it had effect on us, and we shall continue. But the president has said he wants an investigation to it. And he says whoever is culpable will be brought to account.
Yeah, that's a promise.
Meaning he has not even said if a omission or commission was by a state person, it should be left. Or even if it was rigging election, that in a particular station NRM participated in the rigging, he's not even saying that person should be left. He wants a holistic, because he says this is what took us to the bush. We can't do it again. So you are saying, I know you are saying it is promise as usual.
Exactly.
No.
We have not seen the results.
Wait and see it.
Starting from the violence in Kayunga, the violence that was in,
for example,
in here.
For example, in the district of the speaker,
Bukedia.
the RDC was arrested, He lost
But you
his
remember
job.
why?
He
Because
lost his
NRM
job.
had interest there.
Yes,
they had lost. And Mr. Museveni was asking, this was like a
we
movie.
won. We won.
An independent was not yours. NRM did not win. It was the independent candidate that won that election. But he was leaning on for...
Yes, he was
He's
leaning.
an NRM member, but he did not have the card.
He was leaning. So, he was leaning, but a lot was done. So, even this one, whether you are NRM or whether you are who, the president says he wants a total audit.
Okay, let's first leave the promise aside. You talked about intelligence, that there should be intelligence for a deployment such as that, right? What warrants the beating of journalists? What in that deployment, in that intelligence, confirms that a man doing his normal job should be beaten? And he used the word targeted.
No, first of all, I'm not privy to the intelligence. But even then, no amount of intelligence can warrant beating anybody. Not only journalists. Remember, Karanga, that under our constitution, Article 41 is non-derogatable. Article 41 says you will never, under any circumstance, depart from it. That is a right to habeas corpus. Slavery, nobody can be made a
Free
slave.
from frivolity, yes.
Fair hearing,
Yes.
even you, Karanga, if you had twins, Kato and who? Waswa. If Kato accuses Waswa, you have no right to beat Waswa without hearing from Waswa first. Then the last one is prohibition from torture.
Yes.
To the extent that in the past, courts of law, if Ukelo was charged of stealing a goat or a chicken, courts had the power to put in the ruling that you are sentenced to 20 canes and he would be caned in court. Now, not even Supreme Court has that power. So, even torture, I mean corporal punishment in schools is prohibited. So now, you cannot say even an amount of intelligence can warrant a beating. It can't. So torture is prohibited, not even only to the journalist. But it is seen on camera, it has occurred. But I think on the aspect of torture, I have seen a statement from the CDF, General MK, kind of apologizing for that.
Did he?
So yes.
I think he apologized for towards two journalists. He was particular. He said, our friend, and I'm using his word, Isano Francis and the journalists at Salt TV.
Maybe I read it in passing, but I
Yes.
saw him sorry about the beating of the
Of Isano
But the father
and Salt TV.
But the father was equally annoyed about the journalist. I take particular exception on this journalist case because, as I told you from the beginning, I met the European Union ambassadors and I met the UK ambassador and we have met the American ambassador. It's really serious issues that our foreign partners take it. So that's why I wanted to handle it in my note here as a standalone agenda. So the beating of the journalists is not to say other ordinary Ugandans should be beaten anyway. We are not saying beating journalists is so bad that beating other people who came to attend the rally is okay. No. But the journalists were doing a professional job. The journalists and their beating was in camera. And journalists are taken as a fourth step.
But okay.
So it was uncalled for. So I take the beating of the journalists
Yes.
from General MK's comments and from President Museveni, and therefore hope that journalists will be protected in their trade.
All of them didn't apologize, by the way, directly. None of those that you have mentioned apologized.
Going forward, the journalists will be protected in their trade and in their profession. So that was a very unfortunate thing.
Let me first bring in Charles. Charles, these people have political parties and affiliations, at least publicly. You are what we could call the independent one on this panel.
At least publicly.
Yes, I use the word publicly. Charles,
Why the rider?
what don't we see? What should Ugandans be seeing in the Kawempe North elections that we're actually not looking at? What's the statement behind everything that happened?
Anarchy.
Anarchy is a big word.
First of all, it's even wrong to try and massage the Kawempe by-election. The truth of the matter is that in every election there's violence. So there's nothing we can do about it. Now, the concern should be how do we eliminate violence? Is NRM doing anything about it? What about the opposition? Because the opposition guys are equally very violent in elections. I can tell you that for a fact. So, how do we deal with this violence? Because it is scaring off voters.
Yes, the voter turnout in Kawempe was 14%.
People no longer want to participate in elections.
Yes.
They're just tired. They are fed up. The people that are so-called political actors don't seem to appreciate that it is the citizens that must make choices, not the actors on stage to decide what should happen. Now, from the information I've been getting regarding Kawempe by-election, there was an internal contradiction within NRM. Actually, the contest was it was NRM versus NRM, not even opposition.
Mm.
It wasn't.
How so?
It was NRM versus NRM. Nalukola is in the picture and he emerged the winner partly because of the internal contradictions within NRM.
How? Elaborate that.
First of all, Karad, who came as an independent,
Yes, Kaladi.
did not accept the primaries. The primaries were not even there. They were not conducted. It was just a selection. And the argument was that, by the way, even this lady is not a resident in our area.
Which lady?
Nambi. Although, by work, she was operating in that area.
What does the law
So
say?
the NRM failed to manage. There are two people, there are two front runners, Karadi and Nambi, from day one. And this escalated. By the way, it resulted into compromise of intelligence. This did not come out, but it resulted into compromise of intelligence. That is why some operatives are even in jail now as we speak. It was very sickening. Only that on this show I may not come out with all the details that I would have wanted to express because it is not good for the country.
Give us
that link,
context,
because
yes,
there's
However,
a context missing from that
Let's
link.
look at the bigger picture that the internal contradiction within NRM, if it escalates even in 2026, it can result into the collapse of government.
How does an internal
So
contradiction
these-
between Kaladi and Farida Nambi bring about election malpractices and violence that we saw in Kawempe? How does, you say they compromised intelligence, how?
Do you know that there, for instance, there was sharing of information between the Narukora camp and the camp in NRM, one of the camps?
Should it lead to violence?
That I even know the bringing of the so-called, I don't know whether it is JAT, because there is J-A-T-T. There is also J-A-T. What we saw was J-A-T, not J-A-T-T.
Joint Anti-Terrorism Task.
But I think it was a double T.
No, it wasn't. It was a single T. You try to look at the footages.
We're going to look for the footage, and it's going to be. I hope
The guys in
Kawempe get us one of those
were with a
images
single
and publish
T,
it for our people to
not
see.
double T. So I myself, I can't
So
even.
who was beating the people?
I can't even say for a fact that this is Jat, the Jat we know.
Okay.
And it is possible that they were not Jat, the Jat we know. But I also know that there was connivance in bringing those people. And the whole intention was to taint the image of one of the candidates.
Who?
You'll find out.
Mention
So
him.
the dynamics in Kawempe point to a much bigger picture. And my worry is, because when you see a ruling party, that the internal fights can escalate to that level, then it should worry each and every individual. Because this is the elephant in the room. It can collapse on anybody, or all of us.
Okay, so what mandates the beating then? How do the journalists come in?
I've told
be
you,
beaten?
for you to even think that violence cannot appear in an election managed by NRM is just being theoretical. There has been violence. I've been around for a long time. I've been
Yes.
around. I know that there has been violence since 1990. The first election of Semogere, 1996. Yes. So there has been violence ever since. And in fact, some of us have gotten used to it. But now, we are seeing violence shift. It is shifting to the internal party. It's as if there are forces fighting each other within the party. And that has to be dealt with. Because for Kawempe, we saw almost all the high-profile leaders of NRM mobilize for Nambi.
Which they do in other areas too.
The Prime Minister, the President, Chigongo himself was there. So it is not, I fail to understand why another group kept fighting the mainstream camp up to today. And this has to be resolved.
Okay, a minister said or claims that the NUP leaders had stones. And this is the reason as to why security was deployed. In fact, this minister goes on to say that the cane wasn't actually a cane, it was an antenna, right? And this person is seated at the Uganda Media Center. He's a full minister speaking with authority.
What is
and
antenna?
power.
What is antenna?
Sorry?
Antenna. What is
It's
that?
an antenna. It's like a wire that could bring signals to a certain device. But aren't we now being taken for fools as Ugandans?
Mr. Karanga, I'm 45 years of age. I don't want to be seen to be discussing such things because
You've talked about intelligence. Maybe that was the intelligence.
they are empty and I don't want to really deal with them. Because here we have serious issues that are affecting this country. Now, the beating of journalists, we should condemn it in totality. All of us, it does not matter whether you are in NRM or opposition. Because at some point, this journalist is likely to help you. You're the person actually who has the will to beat this person.
Yes.
You will face a problem tomorrow, and the only voice you will have is this journalist.
I won't mention an example in this country.
So it is very important
Yes.
that we hold the media and journalists in very high regard, and we should protect them, all of us, even society, because I know for a fact that even voters have been participating in violence against journalists. They beat journalists. Voters themselves, leave alone the security agents. And this has to stop.
Wow.
So that they assume,
There's
for
a
instance, that if you are working for a particular media organization, it is affiliated to a particular political group. Now, when you're in the field, it happened in Kenya in the last elections. Some journalists even stopped reporting. Some media houses couldn't even go in the field.
Okay, what you're
That is very absurd.
What you're saying, you have put it on the populace of Ugandans, but actually the people who are beating journalists and talking about their affiliation were actually soldiers, according to the journalists themselves.
I have argued both sides.
Yeah, but there's a way you have put it on the
No,
populace.
no.
But the people who beat journalists, I think you cannot even give us an example when a normal Ugandan came and beat a journalist.
My God, you've not read any report might be on journalism in this country. But I implore you.
Give me a case.
I implore you.
I want you to give me a case.
I don't have the details here with me.
For Megan,
but
give
you
cases.
go and interact with all those reports that have been made by credible journalists associations.
Thank you. Mr. You give us ambiguous statements, but sometimes you should be specific. Let me come to you. And he tried to downplay saying that a 45-year-old cannot talk about what a minister says. But, Honorable Cheno, this is a minister who sits in cabinet and is the one who advises the president. He even handles the president's affairs directly. He comes and speaks on national TV, and he says we should not consider that. My question to you is, how did we reach a point when someone can come up with such an idea and tell it to you straight to the face without even cheap decency? How did we reach that point?
Just the other day, a couple of days actually ago, I was a guest in a space in which I was joined by a person who's from NRM, someone relatively related to security, and in the course of the normalcy of the conversation, the person suggested that some of these people, seemingly including the minister you refer, are behaving like Chemical Ali, that infamous Iraqi information minister during the Saddam Hussein and American war in Iraq, where some of you guys will have been probably very young or possibly not yet born. But because it was a popular thing, where an Iraqi Minister of Information does almost like what Zed Maruru also did when I was at Makere, and it was NRA versus their old friends UNLA, not UNLA of UPC government, but UNLA, the breakaway friends of these guys, as the Museveni was coming to take over Kampala. And I will say it, and the NRA guys will be happy, that Zed Maruru for NRA, for UNLA, was answering a question to journalists. And these journalists were telling him that, look, we've got reports that Mbarara has fallen to NRA. And we've got reports that maybe Ntungamo has fallen to NRA. And Zed Maruru comes and said, and we made fun of this actually, and for the first time saying it on television, Maruru said, you guys, you keep on telling us this town is foreign, this one is foreign. Foreign to who? You say Mbarara is foreign, Ntungamo is foreign, Nabomba is foreign. Foreign to who? Tomorrow you say Masaka is foreign and Kampala is foreign. The truth is that we all knew that it was very clear these towns had fallen to NRA.
Yes.
The NRA guys had advanced over and beyond those spaces. And actually, interestingly, so within a week, NRA took over Kampala. And I remember it was a very big fun as for us as students in Makere, because we generally knew that these UNLA guys at that critical time were losing to NRA. And Kampala was really already, these guys have done helicopter gunships, things, and it certainly hadn't worked. So it's cheek. But also on the other, I was trying to give you the spirit of the post-2001 2021 elections, Comrade Awich. You sit at the senior body of NRA. You guys need to continue pushing this thing. After Kawempe should not have been defended by anybody in NRA. The best you guys can say is simply, you guys, and you've done a fair bit, you guys, it's unacceptable. We possibly overstretched, or maybe it was done by some overzealous guys. Cover us up a bit, and then we basically move on. Some of these are people who only a few years ago were very decent guys, friends of us as Ugandans in the political sphere. But I don't know, once people get certain positions, ministerial positions, NRA, either they cease to think or they shift. No. Kawempe in 2025 is completely unacceptable. Soldiers should have not gone there. And of course, the agencies we've not talked about, and I've said in other spaces, we've not talked about Simon Babakama, a senior judge, who leads the Electoral Commission, who led into this thing. He hasn't come out to apologize yet. If he has in the last few days, he shouldn't.
Let me not justify the Abakama, but I was at the pre-poll event that was happening at the Tally Center in Makerere, and the leaders of police were there, commanders were there, Abakama was there, and he said, please, let's ensure that there is no violence. He pleaded with
somewhere.
Them. One would say maybe it's not
consider what Museveni did in
1980.
And consider the nonsensical propaganda they continue with against the 1980 elections, which was not conducted by UPC, by the way. UPC was a winning participant only. Biabakama, at some stage, and someone's a decent guy, should have come and say, you guys, he should have issued a statement midway this process, even leading to election. And he could even have said politically, said that, look, you guys, election has taken place in 3 days' time, and if this atmosphere continues, we may review our position. Maybe that would have scared off or made the guys in security services who were beating people. And this was a deliberate game. It was a deliberate game by a section of people. It may not have been an official government policy, but what happened in Kawempe was deliberate. And we all know it was a deliberate thing that happened, number one. But number two, apart from Simon, Jacob Oboth, who is the Minister of Defense, he's my brother from Tororo, is a friend, and I'm saying it deliberately on television. Jacob ought to have taken it, because soldiers were there. What were soldiers doing in Kawempe? Minister for Internal Affairs, Minister for Internal Affairs, Otafere, very loud man, They say they were beating and killing people in Luwero in the name of UPC, wearing UPC. What were police officers doing the mission? Because it's the Minister for Internal Security. How did it end up? The Inspector General of Police, how can they allow this thing? I think we need to be able to push these things, because you know what? Charles is talking about the first estate, the second estate, the third estate, the middle, the fourth estate. We, the citizens, as the fifth estate. No.
Okay.
Was it really necessary? In any case, we should have gone through this by-election.
At least the State Minister David Muhoozi came out to talk about that.
And then Muhoozi, the son, contradicted him and actually rebuffed him in a very amazing. But just a second. It is cheek that 1980 general elections took place and Museveni went to the bush. One thing that this election has concluded to me is that because Mr. Museveni needs to cleanse himself of Kawempe, or else we will say that Mr. Museveni is a believer in militarism, is a militant guy, he fears multi-party elections, and at every election that has taken place where he has not won, he has shown a very good and decent way of wanting to beat up citizens, particularly his opponents.
Okay, he said he would crush the opposition by this year. I think it's already done. Honorable Awich, I want you to talk about Honorable Balambia Rugahare's statement, but also give us a solution. You as a person, as a senior citizen of this country, what solution do you give as we are entering this election cycle that in the previous times has been characterized by some violence and malpractice? What's your advice, sir?
First, give me the statements of the minister that you want me to talk about.
The minister claims that the whip that was used first to beat people wasn't a whip, it was an antenna. Second, he claims that NUP supporters had bags of stones And he used the word, if you were to equate all of them, put them together, they would form 2 sinotracks. That is the word he used. So I want you to comment on those particular 2 claims.
No, but as you know, it is a minister's statement, and I'm not privy to it. By the way, during the whole exercise, I wasn't there. I was in Igulu for the digitalization and say, but I was also in Igulu to negotiate with the 11 members of parliament who are non-NRM to join. Indeed, we did the negotiation.
Indeed, it's factual. You were there.
We did the negotiation and we presented them to the chairman of the party. So I wasn't in this place totally. And therefore, I cannot really lay credence or disapproval to the minister's statements. But possibly in future interaction, he who alleges has the burden to prove.
That's his
so
point.
The minister will prove it. But your other question, apart from the minister, was solutions.
Yes, sir.
Solutions are there. And therefore, this makes me also talk about what Kazova said, that in every election there is violence. I find this statement is so minibus, and if somebody was to read the intent of the statement, it can be misleading. Because ideally, we are supposed to have free and fair election. So I don't know whether that is his other packaging of the fairness. But the fairness here means that there could be loopholes, for example, like, say, what do you call it, dead votes, what are they called?
Invalid
votes
and invalid, yes.
Invalid votes and all that, meaning that nothing can come out perfect. Nothing can come out of election perfect. But I do not want us to stretch the fairness of election to assert as a country that as a matter of principle there should be violence. Or there is always violence.
No, he's a realist, and he's saying that there is violence. And
But
can he recall?
to me, that is not the sentence. If that is his sentence, then that is it. But to say that in every election there is violence, it's like we are saying, even when we are about to conclude one day, it doesn't happen, we must actually report it because there must be violence. Okay? So even if we have conducted one freely and it is one day to the end and there's no violence, that is not election. We must bring in. Or it's not even to say that even in Kisoro, there must have been violence. So I find this
But
statement
I think you understand what he's saying. You're belittling it to a statement as a lawyer. But do you want to grasp the message behind it?
What I'm saying, we can have election free of violence, and that should be our striving. And we should not sleep and surrender and say, after all, there's violence. No. We should strive as a country with our institution of election commission to ensure that this country conducts credible election free of violence.
I totally concur.
That should be our striving,
So
but not surrender.
How do we achieve that?
Yes, we have. That is the solution we are asking. But that statement makes us surrender and even make us feel like election is inadequate without violence, which is the wrong perception. We should strive for a free, credible, and fair election, devoid of violence.
Yes.
That should be what we should do.
Can I confirm that? Can I
Yes,
endorse?
yes.
To the extent that actually I would suggest that 1980 general elections, notwithstanding all the alleged irregularities and claims and counterclaims, by and large was actually relatively free and fair, put that aside. But actually when you talk about violence, for me who was voting for the first time, and I know James, we are young, I just turned voting age in Agongara, and I've spoken several times. You know, we didn't see police officers. And yes, some other parts of the country may have seen issues. So when it comes to the question of violence, and why I'm saying this and why I'm concurring with the Comrade Rich, and why we actually confirm the message, what's important is this, that we need to convey this to the youth of this country, who really are the electors of today and tomorrow. It is absolutely possible to have an open, free, fair, and democratic election in which there is no violence. that on the side of the citizenry. And so therefore the burden of responsibility therefore on the side of the security services, that it
But
should
even who
it should
starts
not,
this
it should not
violence?
necessarily,
Because
no,
of
that's what I'm
the
trying to say, it should not necessarily even be there.
Yes.
So these things are
Because
possible.
the
But anyway,
person who
Comrade Awich
starts
was
the
submitting.
yeah, please
yes.
conclude, sir.
So, as a party, as NRM, we strive, we dream, we vision a free, fair election devoid of violence. That is our aim. Now, I am answering your question of solutions, but let me also talk about procedures of taking our flag bearer, which I alluded to. We under our constitution, we have two approaches. We have consensus and we have voting where we don't have consensus. So consensus, we can have a constituency conference, or in the case of a constituency. If it is a district, we have a district conference. So it is that conference that is always organized to decide, should we go for outright voting for a flag bearer or should we have a consensus? Okay. Now, whichever we do, always preference is for a consensus. Now, in the case of Kawempe, a consensus was reached on this candidate. Okay. But Karadi seems not to have agreed. But far and wide, that is a one option.
How do we achieve free and fair, violent-free elections in this country?
Yeah, so, but I wanted to clear that, that is how we reached at the flag bearer in Kawempe. Now, how we can have free and fair, election free of violence, it is wide and far. On the side of the party, for example, the party is supposed to have disciplined members. Under the law, there's a demand that every party should register to the Election Commission Code of Conduct. As far as I know now, it is only NRM which has registered a Code of Conduct attached to the Constitution. UPC, in its Constitution, says there shall be a Code of Conduct. But to date, they have no Code of Conduct. So the first place of touching base is in the party itself. How do you ensure that your party members are disciplined? How do you control your party members? Do you conduct control over your party members? So if we control our party members, then that will be first place for free
That
violence.
is done.
The other thing is the state intervention. Ideally, it is the mandate of the police to be the force in conducting election, not the military. Therefore, police should have a proper training, including their reason for intervention or their do's and do nots. And in the event that police under the law allows to call UPDF, it should be clear respect with terms of engagement. So we have one part on the part of the population, because if we parties don't control our party goers or our party members, and the two-party collusion starts, then we are inviting the state to come. Because the purpose of the police, even under normal circumstances, is to maintain law and order. Police is to ensure that when you are going to dance in Angenua, dance in peace. If you are going to the garden, dig in peace. If you are going to church, be in peace. If you are going for election, be in peace. So once the party faithful start to clash, then it divides the police, because there will be breach of peace, and it is the role of police, particularly the police involved in election. But if we now have a solution to our party members, including providing code of conduct to control our party members, to ensure our party members are disciplined. I believe you know Awich has a disciplined NRM, don't you?
Yes.
Am I not?
You are.
So imagine if all NRM were disciplined like
You
this.
see?
Why would there be
But
violence?
nobody has
So
said
in
that.
summary, therefore, to answer your question, which I like to answer questions, your question is solutions for this, for non-violence. 1, party control over their members.
Okay.
2, the state actors should know their terms of engagement and should act professionally. If
Keyword
we do that,
should.
we have no violence.
Keyword should, because it feels
Must.
like they don't know these things.
They must.
Charles, as we conclude, sir, give us your working solution as we gear up for 2025.
Solution for
No violence.
A free and fair election.
no, but
Free and fair,
you see,
violent free election.
Mr. Karwanga, me, I'm not a pretender.
Yes, you're a realist.
I see the things the way they
So
are.
what do we do, sir?
I don't want to sit here and begin lying our viewers. I cannot.
Okay.
There's going to be violence. It's
So
going
it's
to there.
asking why, what should be
What
done?
should we do?
There is nothing that can be
Okay.
done as of
Yes,
now.
Okay.
As long as NRM is still in charge, nothing is going to change. Why?
Okay.
Corruption. 2, NRM is in survival mode. So you cannot expect them a free, violent election in favor of who? So let's be realistic. What we can only do is to sensitize our young people that look, your life is not worth going into that chaos.
Who's starting the chaos? Because it feels like
Yeah,
you're saying
that's
it's the
right.
young
Yes,
people
yes,
starting.
yes.
Who's starting the chaos?
Both camps. The other day I was watching a footage of Kyagulanyi commanding his people to mobilize a Gari. Gari, you know what a Gari means?
What was
During
the command?
General Kale Kayihura's time,
Yes, I know what it
a
means.
Gari means a group of thugs.
Yes. He was telling his
You should
supporters
report
to
that.
do what?
You should report that.
Now,
to the
Let him
police.
first submit
If the opposition,
that. First, what was Kyagulanyi telling his supporters?
he advised his people.
You have evidence.
I don't come here as a drunkard. I've told you I'm a serious person. I take a lot of time when I'm dealing with information. I've been in the media for more than 2 decades. So you think I'm a joker when I come to speak here? Everybody should be concerned. If opposition can create militias, and if NRM is willing to use its military force to crush every dissent, then what do you expect? Anarchy.
Wow. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. It's exactly 9 p.m. We come to the end of this conversation on a high note. You've had that. We shall be coming back again next Monday at exactly 7 p.m. having a conversation with Uganda. This is the Hotline Show where we have hot conversations. But these conversations are hot in order to make Uganda a better place, not to ridicule, scorn, or abuse or attack anybody. We have these conversations to foster, the development of this country for ourselves, but also for the generations that are yet to come. Lillian was on camera, and of course, Alibawa Ali is the gentleman in production. From the entire team, God bless you, and good night, Uganda.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.